This should be a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready to go, son?
I'm ready to go.
Hello, welcome to Hard Compound, an American take on Formula One, British Grand Prix. It's a good one. Race 12, and we've had 6 different winners, and this may be a surprise winner, and yet not a surprise. It was like an episode of Bridgerton. Now, I have to confess, Patrick, I've never seen Bridgerton.
I'm shocked.
I've never seen Bridgerton. But I can already tell you this story arc. It's like, royalty is crowned. That's how this works out. Royalty is crowned. And there's heartbreak for the handsome prince, the young upstart, and then the usurper to the throne. His dastardly plans befell him. But that was a good race. All right, Patrick, son, give me your thoughts, your impressions, your take on Silverstone, British Grand Prix 2024.
It's funny you mentioned Bridgerton, actually, because while I was watching this race, I was thinking, damn, this is Game of Thrones. This is exactly how Game of Thrones goes. I mean, we had drama, intrigue from the moment we set out. It was basically musical chairs for the lead, for the crown, the whole time, entire race. Leader was never secure. We had Russell up there, Hamilton, Norris, Piastri, I think, was up there at one point. Verstappen led the race. I mean, you couldn't tell who was going to win until basically the last 2 laps of the race. There were good battles everywhere, plenty of heartbreak, some backstabbing, some weird decisions were made. And I guess the whole weekend, all I kept hearing is the rain is coming, much like the Starks family motto in Game of Thrones, winter is coming.
Nice.
So it really did kind of make me think about Game of Thrones. It was a lot of fun. There were just so many things happening. And ultimately we got a winner that I think everybody was pretty excited about in Lewis Hamilton. I mean, back on top after a couple season hiatus, which is unusual for him in his long career. So,
I mean, it wasn't just a win finally again for Lewis after 2 years, 2 years plus. It was at Silverstone.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big deal, a record-setting deal. Now, is Lewis back, Patrick?
Well, I think he definitely seems more motivated now that the car is actually performing well and competing against other teams. It almost seemed like he was just sort of over Mercedes and not really interested in driving for them anymore, and pretty much just didn't look like himself when the car was, frankly, not up to speed. Now that it's back, he's been driving well the last few races and really competing. I think over the last 3 race weekends, he has the second most points of any driver aside from Max. And he looks competitive. He looks like he can race. It's hard to say that the old Lewis is back, but he's competitive. And I think much like Alonso, you give him a good car and he's going to race the wheels off of it. So
let me ask you, do you think there are regrets? I mean, Alonso and Renault, you mentioned him, but more correct, Schumacher and Ferrari. It's Hamilton and Mercedes. And Mercedes finally gets their car. I mean, as you said, over the last 3 races, which is not many, but they've looked as good as anyone, their car, compete with McLaren and Red Bull. Ferrari is just, flailing about. They're doing what Ferrari seems to always do, which is just overpromise and underdeliver. And, Lewis, you want Lewis to go out with Mercedes. You don't want him to go out with any other team, I think. And for Lewis's part, I mean, the way things are going, it looks like Mercedes will be better than Ferrari next year.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, right? Small sample size. And Ferrari has looked, of sort of the top 4 teams that you think of, the most consistently competitive over the last 3 years or so. Competitive with Red Bull, I suppose. So hard to say. I'm not sure that. I think there will always be regrets. I think Ferrari are happy that Lewis is looking as good as he is right now, and Hamilton is maybe expecting more from Ferrari and probably even feels like he can bring something more to Ferrari. I'm sure, in his discussions with the team and with Fred Vasseur and everybody, he probably got at least some decent look at what their plans are and sort of what he believes the direction of that team is going. And I assume he wouldn't make that decision lightly, right? This is a man who's broken every record in Formula One and has been in the game for such a long time. I really don't think that he would just sort of go, all right, yeah, I'm gonna leave the team that I've been with for the last 10 years and won, 7 championships with or whatever.
Yeah, 6. Yeah.
Yeah, 6 with Mercedes. That's right.
So speaking of Lewis going to Ferrari, did Sainz, with all these delays, Carlos Sainz, all these delays where it's like, hey man, there may not be a seat for you. Might he wind up at Mercedes? And that's the better deal.
Well, I've been saying since it was announced
Yep.
that Sainz should or would go to Mercedes. There's really no other reasonable seat for him. I mean, it's not like he's in the Bottas or Perez kind of situation where it's like, oh, you're at the very top, but you're clearly underperforming. He's, at a team that's almost near the top, and he is at least like competitive with his teammate pretty much every weekend. So there's no reason that he should be out of a job in Formula One. And the most reasonable seat for him is Mercedes.
Yeah.
I expect that to happen, but I don't know. Toto's kind of a weird guy. He's super cliquey. I don't know how many discussions he's had with Sainz and his agent and family and whatever. So could be a weird one where, some random person gets thrown into Mercedes and now Sainz has to look somewhere else.
Now, back to the race. That was a good one. One of my favorites of the year, that with Canada. We finish every episode with our predictions for the next race. And I was predicting an all-British podium. And I was darn close.
Yeah, if that Dutch fella hadn't fucked it up.
Well, Max had a good race. I mean, Max just shows why he's so good. I mean, it's just like, oh, I've got a lesser car this week, just like last week, just like the week before. But between my driving, our strategy, the pit crew, I think he's extended his lead. But I really thought we could have an all-British podium with Lando, then George, then Lewis. And we got Lewis. George, though, that was a tough break. I mean, he had a great weekend. I think they said his water system, TNF. But Lando, I don't know if Lando's part of the problem or if Lando is the problem. But since he won in Miami, I think it was. So let's 5 or so races. I'm not sure how many, but they've had, if not the best car, a car that should be able to win week in, week out now. And they have just the one. In this one, they didn't double stack. So Piastri had a chance to win as well. He had a chance. He had a slow pit stop. They were bringing in cars to switch tires, and they kept Lando out. And I remember, because I think I was listening to the Sky feed, I think it was Crofty. I mean, immediately they said, look at the times. Look at the time differences. This is immediately, the announcers knew it was a bad call. So what's going on there?
I think McLaren made a bad call on not double stacking with Piastri there. Totally ruined his race. He absolutely should have been gunning for top 3. He made up for that mistake, and he had a quick car and ended up P4. But, they really sort of screwed that up. I mean, Mercedes double stacked, and I think it was maybe George at the time was behind. And, he lost a couple of seconds waiting there, but no real big deal. I think Piastri lost 20 plus seconds on that lap that he had to stay out. That's just not acceptable.
Yeah, and he did not lose by 20 seconds. Yeah, I mean, I don't have the times here in front of me, but yeah.
Yeah, he had a really strong race overall on track. And then I think, again, near the end, Norris pitting and taking softs was a strange decision to me. I thought it was very obvious that they should go with the mediums. They chose not to and followed Hamilton, what he was doing. And ultimately, that kind of screwed him. I'm not sure. He really didn't look like he had any pace at all on that last stint. So Max was pretty easily able to pass him and couldn't chase down Hamilton at all, which was surprising. So I don't know. I think Norris probably could have done a little bit better job bringing those tires in and sort of getting that car up to speed. But the decision to go with those tires was sort of ridiculous.
I've got to say, we talked last race when Max and Lando collided. We agreed that it was Max's fault. He's aggressive. A 10-second penalty probably wasn't enough, though given the way the rules are, I'm not sure what more they could have done. However, we agreed it was Max's fault. 10 seconds probably wasn't enough, but most of the outrage was over the result, which was Max was able to finish and score points, and Lando was out. Lando, I think, was quite rightly pissed about what Max did. But, I think Max tried to make amends as best as he could. He's someone who doesn't like to give anything. And I think Lando put it aside. I think most of the drivers in the grid put it aside. But the head of McLaren, Zach Brown, did not put it aside. And all season long, he's been attacking Max, Red Bull, Christian Horner, going after Max, saying, if he didn't have the best car, he wouldn't be winning. Making remarks about Christian Horner, making remarks about Max's driving, as was the team principal at McLaren. And I got to say, it's like, you know what? I'm glad you screwed up. It's like, look, you take that stuff to the stewards, you make your case, and that's it. I mean, Zach Brown at McLaren spent the entire week focused on Max Verstappen. And I'm like, well, now look what happened in the race. You had two cars that could have won. Neither did.
Yeah, I think definitely it seems like the focus from some other teams is not always strictly on winning. And that's sort of the reason Red Bull is so good now and the reason Mercedes had been so good. It's like all they focused on or cared about was winning. And I think that's the mentality you absolutely need in order to do that. We look at Ferrari consistently and it's like, well, it's pretty clear the mentality is not we must win above all else. It's we are Ferrari above all else. At McLaren, it's like, we're the chippy underdogs. Like, no, you're fucking not. You should be winning. So I sort of agree with you. I think, look, at some point, you got to take your eyes off of everybody else and focus on you, what you're doing, how you can improve, what you got to do to win, because they absolutely have a car that's capable of winning pretty much every weekend. It seems like two drivers who are very clearly capable of winning pretty much any weekend. And so I think they really got to buckle down and prove that. They're closing in. Lando is second in the driver standings. McLaren is a few points off, I think, of Ferrari for second in the constructors. Yeah, they got to make sure they continue to compete and do everything properly.
Speaking of continuing to compete, Checo, Sergio Perez, another just inexplicably bad weekend. This is not just, in practice and qualifying. This is in the race. This is all weekend, in fact. I don't know. I think maybe just the pressure just is so bad at some point. You just, trying to keep your head above water, do whatever it takes forever until you can't anymore. It's just, this is tough to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think of any driver not named Logan Sargent this year, Perez has been the most disappointing, embarrassing driver on the grid. I assumed last year that Red Bull was going to get rid of him. And then they didn't. And I assumed absolutely this year Red Bull would get rid of him. And then they said, no, we're going to sign him for a couple more years. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way with how competitive these other teams are getting that you can just rely on Max to beat out all the other teams. Not just drivers, but other teams. Because Checo's not fucking helping you.
Yeah, he's had that Valtteri Bottas role like Valtteri held for so many years at Mercedes. It's like, look, we've got our star driver. That's who we're focused on. And we've given him a car. You just need to protect the team. Be the calming presence. Don't challenge anybody. And just bring the car into second. And if that's not possible, just make sure our number one guy is protected and we get the constructors. But like you're saying, McLaren, Ferrari, now Mercedes. Mercedes is still distant because they're slow start. But, the constructor battle is not over. We're just halfway through the season. And man,
it's 70 points right now from Ferrari to Red Bull and 75-ish from McLaren to Red Bull. So that's a couple races right there.
Yeah, that's about 6-ish points a race for the remaining 12 races. Less, with sprints.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you've been saying they should replace him last year. You said it this year. I'm not sure he'll be back next year. But another person we didn't think would be back next year or make up through most of this year, Daniel Ricciardo. And Ricciardo's been looking good. Not great, but good in that Red Bull, that Racing Bull. And I don't know. There are rumors that maybe he could replace Sergio, including this season.
Yeah, I think it's weird because Red Bull seems like they're doing everything to not sort of disrupt the status quo at Red Bull, right? Max is the golden boy. He'll get us pretty much everything we need. We just need somebody else reliable to fill in the gaps. And for several years now, Checo has done that perfectly fine. This year, not so much. And so I think they probably are looking. And there have been rumors about Ricciardo replacing him. I think of anybody right now on the grid, especially that Red Bull kind of already owns the rights to, he's kind of the guy, right? You could say, oh, Yuki's been better than him, or why not Liam Lawson? Well, because that would kind of disrupt the status quo. That would shake things up at
That's
Red
a good
Bull.
Point.
And so Ricciardo, while maybe not the most prolific on-track driver currently in the Red Bull system, the most sort of reliable to do exactly what Red Bull needs that driver to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The role for that number 2, I call it the Bottas role. Sergio has done that, but this year he's failing. Mercedes got rid of Bottas when he failed, when Max won and beat Lewis. And I think that's a good point that I don't think there's any other driver out there who could take on that role where it's like, look, just fill in the gaps. Max is the man. Here's a good car. It's reliable. It's fast. Do enough to protect Max. Make sure we get the constructors. And I think you're right, because there's no other driver, I think, out there that could do that and would do that.
Mm-hmm.
You give that sign. Even young Liam Lawson, he's going to throw him to the wolves, but he's going to try and prove himself.
Yeah.
Bringing Carlos Sainz, he's going to try and beat Max. Ricciardo fully understands that role. I think that's a really good point. So we've had 6 winners, amazing, in 12 races, 6 different winners. So the 4 best cars, Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes. We've had both Mercedes drivers win, both Ferrari drivers win, but only one from Red Bull, one from McLaren. Who do you think will be first to get a win? Oscar Piastri or Sergio Perez?
Oh, that's silly. I feel like the way they're driving currently this season, it seems like Piastri has more confidence and capability to win. I think the Red Bull car and sort of team overall seems like they will give Perez a better opportunity to win. But based on sheer sort of driver results so far this season, I would give the edge to Oscar.
It's funny because next race I think is Hungary, and Sergio does well there, so we'll see. All right, your top 5 for British Grand Prix.
Top 5, I think This was a fun one. We got some potentially unexpected results sort of up and down the order, but you gotta go driver of the day with Lewis Hamilton, finally winning again. And he looked damn good too. It was not just sort of a walk in the park kind of win for him. He really had to compete. He got past his teammate Russell early on in the race, held that position, had to drop back after McLaren came on, and then near the end of the race was holding off Max and Lando on those soft tires. So I think really good race from him. Sort of a classic Lewis Silverstone performance. Then for number 2, I actually do have George Russell. I think he looked pretty much among the best drivers this weekend. Took pole and just looked good overall. A little bit down on pace compared to Lewis, but looked really solid, looked competitive with the McLarens and with Max. And he seemed very likely, like you were saying, to get a podium until that mechanical issue. So unfortunate for him, but I think he did drive really well this weekend. Then I got to give it to Max. He's really having to compete by himself this year. He's got a really good team backing him, and they kind of always put him in a position to win or to do well at least. And he comes through pretty consistently. I think in sort of the middle part of that race, it looked like he wasn't going to podium. It looked like he would maybe just crack the top 5 potentially. And lo and behold, turns out by the end of the race, he's in P2, breathing down Hamilton's neck for the win. That just shows how good he is, I think.
I thought this was one of Max's best drives. And, I just think, this is the one where, as we were talking about earlier, Zach Brown and McLaren seemed to put his focus on Max, just denigrating Max. And it's like, look, Max got the podium. You're a guy in a faster car, he blew it. You're second driver in a faster car. You blew it. But yeah, this was, I thought, one of Max's best drives, even for not winning.
Yeah, I think definitely fair. Then I got Hulkenberg. I mean, what is happening at Haas? I think that was a pretty cool weekend for him and for the team. I mean, I'm impressed by. I probably shouldn't be impressed because you got P6 or something.
But I mean, that's 2 in a row. I mean,
yeah, it's 2 in a row, and they're looking good.
He is the dude. I mean, we've been talking up Nico all season long, and a bit talking up Haas and sort of bad-mouthing Kevin Magnussen, but Nico is the dude. I mean, he is just looking great. I don't know who said it, but, because Haas uses a Ferrari power unit, and it's like, who's the best Ferrari driver on the grid right now? And it's Nico Hulkenberg. And I was like, damn,
oh, no.
I think he might be right.
Yeah, he's been really solid, good for that team, and drove another really solid weekend for Haas. Got a lot of points. I think he passed Yuki in the driver's standings as well. He's only maybe a point back of Lance Stroll. So, and Haas.
Yeah, that is very impressive. And Audi bought Sauber, the kickstake team, and he goes to Audi next year, and man, they got a dude,
Could be really, really good. That team is not performing very well this season, but hopefully next season they get it together. Then lastly, I have Yuki. I think he's just continuing to compete. He's just, I don't know, feisty. I like watching Yuki. I think he's actually a really fun driver to watch race. He's just scrappy and doesn't really give an inch. I think he's improved a lot in that aspect, though, too, where he's not getting into as many collisions or incidents as he used to, and drove another good race, got points, and is sort of sticking with those other teams that are sort of trying to claw back into the constructors race.
Nice. So you have Lewis, George Russell, Max Verstappen, Nico Hulkenberg, and Yuki Tsunoda for your top 5 for the British Grand Prix. I am in agreement with your first 4. Yuki less so. I mean, I could have picked. I'd like to see the data because I thought Piastri, Stroll, even and Albon, I think may have had a better race. All right, switching to the soft compound. They premiered that F1 movie, and it looks legit. And by looks legit, I don't mean it's going to be a fun movie or there's a great story or great characters. But the scenes they showed where they're on the grid, where they're in the garage, where they're racing, that all looked legit. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think because we kind of see that pretty frequently now where we've got these actors just walking around the paddock in sort of their full suits and everything. Like I saw videos of what appeared to be Brad Pitt doing like legit post-race interviews, those kinds of things. It absolutely looks, like F1. And that's cool to see. They're spending a shitload of money on it, I think. So I hope it does.
They're like, Apple is spending $300 million, which is just insane. God. I mean, you could run 2 F1 teams for that, Now, look, Apple's worth multiple trillions of dollars. They can afford to throw $300 million and make Brad Pitt and Hollywood happy. And then hopefully they lock in, customers to their iPhone and their Apple TV. So, $300 million is not much, that's no worry. Because as much as I love F1 and as much as the trailer looked legit, there's no way that movie makes a profit. It's not happening. Like I said, you could run 2 F1 teams for this amount of money. And that's not including all the marketing they'll spend and all the, having to cut, split the revenues with the theaters. So, yeah, Apple's definitely losing money, but it does look legit. And, it's going to be an IMAX. So I definitely would like to see this in IMAX.
Yeah.
And co-star Carrie, what is her name? She was in Banshees of Inisherin, Carrie Condon, I think. I mean, and she makes me stupid. So this all looks good. It's F1 and Carrie Condon. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, though, because I do see F1 seems like they're really trying to get into sort of Hollywood and social media, and they love a star on the grid, So it's very interesting, I think, seeing all these actors, other athletes and sporting stars that are constantly showing up at all these events. And I think it's good for the sport overall. I think it garners interest, but it is a little bit of a weird departure from kind of the old guard kind of Formula One that we're sort of used to, where nobody really gave a shit about it. And it was just the only people that showed up were motorsport fans or like really wealthy people that owned a lot of Ferraris.
Right. They were cash rich and really needed to funnel that through,
Yeah.
so the various governments couldn't get their hands on it. Yeah, that's right. I mean, had you told us back when we started watching F1, in a few years there's going to be this massively popular series on Netflix. Everyone's going to watch it. All the girlies are going to watch it. Everybody's going to be an F1 fan. I was like, no, not going to happen. Or that like ESPN would, have the broadcast. No, that's not going to happen. Or that, American teams, there'd be 3 American races. No, not going to happen. A big Hollywood movie. Apple's going to get involved. Also not going to happen, but it's all happened. It's pretty amazing. I mean, we've always knocked Gene Haas for just underfunding the Haas team. But damn, dude bought near the bottom. Not like, say, Red Bull. Red Bull really bought at the bottom. but they've had to spend, 20 plus years. Gene Haas, woof. I mean, Haas is worth over $1 billion. It has to be. It's amazing. Now, the problem with this F1 movie is I have a better idea for a script. And again, I don't know who said this, but I saw that, these F1 cars, they're filled with so many sensors, right? And they're just throwing off just terabytes of data after each race and during races even. Forget all the sensors. The F1 car itself has its own IP address. And when I discovered that, I thought, we need to hack into a car. We need to hack into a car while it's going around the track in a race And it's like, that has to be a script, and maybe there's some Russian oligarch, he wants his son, we'll call him Nikita, let's say, and, have him out
Last
on the grid.
name Mazepin, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. But like that could be a script. You hack into an F1 car, in
That
the race.
should be like a Bond movie. Like Nikita Masterspin is the evil villain, and James Bond has to foil his plan to hack into somebody's F1 car.
Yes, because we want a British champion or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, that I just think that's a better story. I mean, the problem with this Apple F1 movie is, as good as it looks, from the trailer, the story just looks so hacked.
It's just like an old guy, right?
It's totally the what's the book, Holden Caulfield with Catching the Rye, when he's making fun of his brother, who's like a script writer, who does no shit, and he'll just like watch, it's like that. This is the problem with this Apple movie. The script looks absolute hack, but the visuals look awesome.
Yeah.
Across the line, that's the segment where we predict the next race. The next race is in 2 weeks in Hungary. And then I think it goes to Belgium, and then it's the long summer break that the Europeans get, which we do not. Hungary, I think last year it was Max, Lando, and then Sergio. I just looked that up. So in across the line, we choose our top 5 finishers. If we get them right, what's a point for each one? If we get them in the exact right spot, that's 3 points. Once we choose a driver, he is off the board. Patrick, what are the standings following the British Grand Prix?
Yeah, following the British Grand Prix, you made up a little bit of ground. So actual top 5 from this race was Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, and then Carlos Sainz. So you had sort of a nice top 5 here. You had George Russell, unfortunately didn't score anything for you. Max Verstappen, though, P2, so you got a full 3 points for that guy.
Nice.
And Leclerc, unfortunately, one of the most disappointing races of the season.
Man, the deal with the devil, the win in Monaco. Oof.
Then you had Oscar, P4, so another 3 points there, and then Yuki, P5. I got 3 guys, Norris, Sainz, Hamilton, but all in the wrong spots. So I got only 3 points to your 6. So score now is me 40 to you 32.
Okay, this is not bad. This is like Red Bull, Ferrari, and the constructors right now. Okay, so for Hungary, who goes first?
You have first pick.
Excellent. I think this is the first time since he was 5 years old that Max has not won a race in 2 consecutive weeks. No, I mean, for Max not to win in the last couple of years is just, rare in itself. And for him to go 2 weeks, 2 races, and I think it's going to be 3, because I have next week in Hungary, or in 2 weeks, I'm sorry, George Russell, who I think absolutely would have won at Silverstone.
I don't think so.
Okay,
I think Hamilton had it in the bag.
I don't, but man, dang it, we was robbed. 2 Brits should have in Mercedes should have been fighting.
Because they were both driving well, but
yep.
I think Hamilton had the pace on him, at least through the time that Russell actually had a car underneath him. But yeah, I think Russell definitely has a shot. Hungry. Let's see. You know what? I took Lando P1 last week. I'm going to do it again. I'm saying he's getting his second win in Hungary. Lando Norris. Okay. Then I'm going to take Lewis.
Ooh, Lando and Lewis. Nice. All right. I will take Max in 2. Ooh. And I'm going to go next year's Mercedes driver, Carlos Sainz in P3.
Next year's Mercedes driver. Very nice. Then I'm going to take Oscar, P3. And who else do I want? We'll see. Let's say it doesn't rain in Hungary. I'll take Leclerc.
Okay. All right. So then for my Sergio, I said earlier he does well, and I probably shouldn't have said that, but I'm going to take Sergio Perez for my fourth. And in fifth, we talked him up this week. I'm going to go Daniel Ricciardo.
Ooh, nice. I'm going to take Alonso.
Nice. So I have George Russell, Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez, and Daniel Ricciardo, my top 5 for Hungary 2024. You have Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton, Oscar Piastri, Charles Leclerc, and then Fernando Alonso. Any crazy predictions, Patrick?
I think the only crazy prediction I have is that, yes, Carlos Sainz will drive for Mercedes next year, but that leaves their superstar young guy, Kimi Antonelli, on the outs. So where does he go? But partners with Ollie Behrman at Haas for kind of just an insane, young, weird lineup that potentially will score exactly 0 points next season.
That would be a really fun team. I think that also would be great branding, you know? Yeah, because Nico's leaving. I think K-Mag should go, and they've already brought in Behrman. I think that would be a great team. That's a good one. I don't really have a prediction, except I saw this interview with Lewis Hamilton talking about, he doesn't like to drive in America because, Americans are such aggressive drivers. And, I was just listening to some various stories because it was July 4th weekend here in the U.S., and I did what most Americans do, which was spend too much time in traffic. And I remembered, it's now been over 30 years ago. I pulled up at a light, and right next to me, in a brand new, first ever Honda NSX, was George Lucas, then of Star Wars fame. This was 1990. And this Lewis Hamilton interview, he was saying, I don't like to drive in America because they're such aggressive drivers. And I was like, oh my God, if I ever pull up alongside him, I'm going to cut him off and flip him off, only just for the story of it, So I now am manifesting this. So I'm predicting that this will happen.
That would be hilarious. And I hope he's driving around something like Lando's full chrome Shelby Cobra that he pulled up to at Silverstone.
Nice. All right. I want to thank you all for listening to everybody's most beloved father and son F1 podcast. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend. And we are Lights Out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
You just finished listening to Hard Compound, recorded in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and around the world.